Hey everyone, welcome to episode 9 of Miller's Military Moments podcast, which is this one's about paternity leave and deployment exercises, but also my first one on YouTube. So this is my first video, first podcast on YouTube. So if you are finding me for the first time on YouTube, there are 8 previous episodes which will give you insight to some of the stories previous to this one. And you can find them on my website, millersmilitarymoments.com. And there's links to my socials on there. There's a subscribe button that you can click, and I'll send you a weekly newsletter, nothing more than that. But you can get inside information as far as what's going on with the podcast and some what's coming up in the podcast before anybody else hears that information. So, and you can go back and listen to the 8 previous episodes so you can kind of catch up if this is your first time checking out my podcast on YouTube. So thank you. Welcome to the podcast. And this is my story. This is my story about my 20-year Army career. So thanks for joining me. So today, episode 9, we are paternity leave and deployment exercises. So the time frame really, so we're looking at, fall of 2002, and we've really kind of gone through the summer and through my previous episodes and, gotten up to the fall. And really what's kind of happening at this point at Fort Hood and really in the world, as you got to remember, is we're in Afghanistan, but the war drums are beating for Iraq. And there's a good chance that my unit and teammates are going to head on over there. So we've got to start getting ready and going through training exercises and stuff like that. But before that, my son's getting ready to be born in middle of October of 2002. So at the time, we are allowed to put in what we call leave. So it's your vacation time. So you earn 30 days of vacation time a year when you're in the military. And so in 2002, there was no paternity leave or policy for the dads. So, but you could request 10 days of your own leave and then own vacation time. And then depending on circumstances, you could possibly request more depending on what was going on. So that was happening, internal preparations to deploy, field training exercises, loading of equipment, all kinds of things going on. So, so for me, also I'll kind of fast forward to now. Now the Army gives you 21 days of paternity leave. So it's free leave, free vacation time, essentially, to spend with your newborn and your spouse when the baby is born, so it doesn't come out of your vacation time, which is a whole lot better program and policy than what it was, 19 years ago whenever our son was born. But things change, and glad it has changed for the better. But back then, yes, I can only put in for 10 days, and especially depending on what was because of what was going on, at the time. So I put in 10 days of my vacation time, and my son was born middle of October, and there were some complications with the birth and everything. Nothing too serious, but there were some challenges in there, and like probably anybody will tell you that those 10 days went by quick. I mean, they went by really fast, and so I put in an extension request. I requested an extension. I had the vacation time, and I requested an extension and said, hey, can I stay home for, another week or whatever it was? And this will kind of tell you, the answer will kind of tell you a little bit about the mindset of the Army, even back then, really compared to how it is today. I think it's a little bit better today when we're dealing with people and their issues. We've got a long way to go. I'm not going to deny that. But there's, I think we've come a long way as well. So the answer was no. pack your bags and you're going to the field. That was the answer. So not only could I not stay home with my family any longer, but had to pack my bags and go to the field and do our field training exercises, which is really, we go and, quote, camp out for a week and do different things. I mean, there's a lot more involved than that. But yeah, so no extra time at home and, get your stuff ready and get ready to go to the field and do your training exercises. So you have to remember, so during that time, so let's talk about mid-October to really the end of December, well, to Thanksgiving. Let's just say Thanksgiving. So we were going to the field a couple different times, a couple of different training exercises. We had to clean all of our equipment. We loaded all of our equipment in our trucks and trailers and stuff. And then we had to take all of that equipment over to what we call the railhead, the rail yard, load it up onto train cars, get it shipped down to where the big boat was down at the port, and it would get loaded on there and head overseas, and then we would meet our equipment over there. So all of that had to happen for a lot of people in our division at the time. We're talking about 20,000 soldiers plus their equipment, tanks, Bradleys, aircraft. I mean, a lot of stuff, right? So you can imagine a lot of the work that goes into that. So the answer was no on my extended leave. Was I happy about it? No, absolutely not. I mean, was I okay with it? Well, of course I had to be. The Army tells you to do something and you do it, and I did it. And that's one of the things that definitely, learned to deal with was having to be flexible, having to, deal with adversity, if that's the right way to say it. Like, we wanted to do it one way and we expected it to be that way or hoped it would be that way. And then the Army tells us no. And, we're early in our Army career at this point. So we haven't been told no a whole lot yet, but we would find out in later years that, hey, the Army tells us no a lot. So we would get better at, being flexible and dealing with change and, figuring out how to get through some of those challenges. And, I'll tell you, my wife was just amazing. This is the beginning of it. And she, newborn baby, and even looking ahead at that point, 6 months from that point, I'm getting on a plane and leaving to go overseas. So it's tough, and, if you haven't listened to the episode where I interviewed Brandy, that's, really definitely go back and listen to that one, because she gives a great perspective on, being a military spouse and dealing with a lot of those challenges and with 2 young kids. And, so, my wife is just amazing at dealing with all those changes and just being, hey, don't worry about it. I got it. I'll take care of the baby. I'll be okay. I'll reach out to Brandy if I need help. I'll reach out to whoever if I need help. And, she was like, just go do your thing, go be where you got to be. And I got it from here. And I'll tell you, not all spouses are created equally. She is, 1 in a million. And that was, if I could almost sum her up of 20 years of my career, that's how she handled almost everything. At the time I didn't know that's how she was going to be so great and handle everything, of course. But, she just, hey, we got it. I will handle it from here. You go focus on your job. You go focus on what you got to do, and we'll make it happen. Not that it was ever easy for her. Or she had any idea how she was going to make it happen, but she always did. And, part of the reason why I'm excited to retire here shortly is, to give her that opportunity to go be who she wants to be. And maybe I can take care of some of those things for once. And so, here she is again. Hey, don't worry about it. I got it. Go to the field, do your thing. And so, yeah, I did, go to the field and do our training exercises and get all of that stuff done. So one of the one of the training exercises during that time, we had to take all of our equipment in the motor pool. And if you haven't listened previously, definitely go back and check out some of the previous episodes about the motor pool and what all is in there. And so we are preparing, to go to invade Iraq, to go through Turkey. And you can go back and look at a lot of the historical stuff that happened during that time. We didn't get to go through Turkey, but I was in 4th Infantry Division, and we were supposed to go through Turkey and invade northern Iraq and come through that way. So we were practicing driving our equipment, our trucks, 45 miles a day. And we would drive, 45 miles. They had routes planned out, and we would go and do all that and then end up at our tactical assembly area. And, which was just simulating those long drives, which, 45 miles doesn't sound like a lot, but with Army equipment, Army trucks, let me tell you, they break down. They don't want to go that far. How much equipment do we have to fix them? Do we have parts? How many mechanics are there? How many do we leave the truck there? Like, if we're really talking about simulating moving through Turkey and northern Iraq as we're moving, do we leave the truck on the side of the road? How many trucks have radios? Like, look, I'll tell you at that point, not every truck had a radio, so it's not like you can really communicate with people. So you've got to have different plans to pull over and if you break down. And so our equipment wasn't in the greatest shape, so we had a lot of challenges, driving that stuff and getting it ready to go. And we spent a lot of time on that equipment because we knew that's the only way we had to get all of our equipment. And we're talking an aviation support unit. So we have a lot of maintenance equipment, a lot of parts that's critical to fixing the helicopters and keeping them up so that they can keep flying and doing their missions. And so we have to get all of that equipment, to where we're going to work on these helicopters. So it's critical to have all of these vehicles working. So we practice that time and time again. And, so then at the end of these exercises, we come back to the motor pool and, bring all of our equipment back. And now we've got to go to the wash rack. So what is that? Well, wash rack, that's what we call it. But really, it is a large, glorified car wash. But it's made for tanks, armored personnel carriers like the Bradley, our big 5-ton trucks, Humvees, which many people are familiar with, all of those kinds of things. But like anything else in the Army, it's hard to use. It's hard to sign for it. Yes, sign for it. Somebody has to go and say, from a unit, says, I'm using this today, and I take full responsibility for everything that's happening at that wash rack that day. And they have to know how to operate the different areas of it so they can turn the water on in certain areas, because you take the tanks in a specific wash area versus the trucks, and then you've got to get all the mud and stuff off of them. And so that is at least, and especially for us with as many trucks as we have, like a whole day process. I mean, you're sitting in line over there, like you're waiting for the car wash, like all day long. And I remember this particular day, it was raining and it was muddy everywhere. It was muddy when we were in the field. It's the fall in Texas, and it just happens that way. And it was raining, and I'm sitting here thinking, why are we going into the wash rack and we're just going to drive out of there and we're going to get the trucks just as muddy and take all this mud back to the motor pool? And anyway, I brought it up. I said something to somebody, and I was told quickly, stop using common sense. That's not how we do things in the Army. I'm like, okay. So sure enough, I'll tell you, over my 20 years, many things were like that. Because we had the wash rack was signed for and it was operating that day, we had to use it no matter what, because another unit had it the next day and then the next day, and there was no other time to use it. So we had to use it. So we go there, and it's such a process to get your truck in there. And then it's like, you want to talk about water everywhere. Like, we're wearing our wet weather gear, which is great. Thanks for the Army for supplying me with some wet weather gear. Wearing our wet weather gear, because if you don't, you will be soaked coming out of there. So it's not just like a sprayer that you hold in the manual car wash that you drive your car onto. There's jets, shooting certain places and areas to try to get the wheels and get underneath the trucks and stuff like that. So there's water everywhere. And anyway, we get our trucks through and we head back to the motor pool, and of course there's just mud everywhere still, like, because we drove through the mud to get back there, and then now we're bringing all this mud back into the motor pool. But I'm I'm a young soldier. Army tells me to do something, and I'm like, Roger that. Like, let's just execute. So, we get done with all that, and we get all of our equipment back in the motor pool, and the next thing, so finally get home, get some relaxation, get hot food, and get a hot shower, and get to be at home and see the family a little bit. So that was nice. And then the next big event in all this is getting our stuff, all of our trucks. So ultimate goal is the trucks have to end up on a boat that's down at the port in Texas to go overseas. Well, how do we do that? So we have to drive our trucks over to a staging yard, and in that staging yard, we make sure they're good to go maintenance-wise, and then we drive over to the railhead. We call it the railhead. It's a rail yard, but it's the end of railroad tracks, so there's areas that you can drive up onto the rail cars, and there's all these flat cars. And if you've ever seen a train with military vehicles on it, it's really just a bunch of flat cars with trucks and tanks and whatever else that unit's equipment is on there. Well, we have to go and do that and put that on there, put our equipment on there. And it's not, so there's some people that are in charge down there, but they don't do any of that stuff for you. They don't drive the vehicles up on there. They don't chain them down for you. So you have to do all this stuff yourself. I mean, they teach you and they train you how to do it, but you have to get all your equipment on there, and then chain it down properly, and they inspect it, and then you're good to go. And then all your equipment's gone from the rail. By train, it'll go down to the port. Somebody else from there will take it off of the trains and then put it on the boats. And sometimes it actually is soldiers from other units that will be tasked with that operation. They'll say, hey, we need you to go down there and pull all the trucks off. Just like they'll do the same thing when we're overseas. When the boat comes in, they'll say, hey, so many people need to go down there, and you'll bring all the equipment off of the boat and stage it in the staging area. And then each unit will come down and collect their vehicles and their equipment. So sometimes that happens. But for us at this point, all we needed to do was get our equipment onto the rail cars, which I'll tell you is an experience in itself. So the size of this operation, again, my earlier episodes, we talked about how big Fort Hood was. We're talking about a division, so 20,000 soldiers and their equipment, and we're trying to get all this equipment, onto the rail cars, and nobody has deployed in this size and this amount of people and equipment in a long time. So there's not a lot of experience in planning how we're going to get, all the stuff here and how long things take. So things took a whole lot longer than most people thought. I'll tell you that. So really, in short, we were awake for about 48 hours in the middle of November heading into Thanksgiving. At one point when we took all of our equipment and drove it down to the staging area and getting ready to go onto the railhead. 48 hours, we were waiting. And at one point, my wife and Brandy brought me and Brandy's husband at the time food, like brought us. And the Army did give us some MRE, so I don't want to say that they didn't feed us. They did. But anytime you can get hot food or any kind of other food, you take it, right? So, and it gave me a few minutes to see my wife and then my son for a few minutes. But so yeah, I mean, 48 straight hours. Got a few little cat naps here and there at night. But so when it was my turn to get the vehicle down there, we get the vehicle there, and I'm one of the last groups, okay, which it happens. Somebody's got to be last, right? And it was just me. My turn to be last. And so we are getting ready to drive a 5-ton, which is a bigger truck if you haven't ever seen them. And really, they're like a troop carrier. So they have the tarp on the back, and you can see troops in the back often in movies if you've ever seen them like that. So they're like troop carriers, but they were 5 tons. We called them 5-ton trucks. And they have the long nose up front. And a lot of the trucks today in the modern Army, they're flat nose up front. So, but these were a little bit older. They had the nose out front, where the engine and stuff is. So I have to drive this truck on 2 rails up onto the rail car. And it's raining, probably about 35 degrees, so it's not snowing, and it's almost sleeting, and it's really cold, but it's slick. So they call them spanners, and the spanners are barely wider than the truck's tires, and these truck tires are, huge. I mean, they're big, and so you've got to be very careful, and you have somebody that's on the car out in front of you that's guiding you. We call it ground guide, right? So you're watching them, and they're guiding you, and they're waving you forward or telling you to stop or whatever the case is. And so you've got to be very careful. So when I come up on the first rail car, no problem, but I've got to drive like down 3 or 4 cars. So if you're the first one on the train, you're driving way down the other end. So you've got to cross several cars, and in between each rail car, again, there's those 2 spanners that you've got to put the tires on and go across. And then you just take your time and pay attention, and you should be okay. So the 5-ton truck that I'm driving is, if you're on the ground, if the truck is on the ground and it's probably up to the seat, it's not quite as probably big as an 18-wheeler if you've never seen one of these trucks, but not too much smaller. So you're kind of high like that. You're up that high. So imagine being that high and on the rail car, and the rail car itself is probably at least 6, 7, 8 feet, I think, off of the ground where the railroad tracks are. And it slopes down pretty quickly after the train tracks. So all the way down at the bottom there, if I looked out my left window, is pretty far down. I mean, I don't even know, 25, 30 feet. It's pretty far, right? So it's kind of scary, honestly. I was a little nervous and taking my time and doing this. So as I'm going over like the second or third car, I'm almost there. The spanner on the front left slipped out from the tire, and I've got my hands on the wheel like this, holding it, good 10 and 2 position, and I lurch forward and down to the left because that spanner slipped out, and the tire hit the train track and just shredded, and immediately lost all of its air. But what I'm thinking is I'm oh my God, this is about to be really bad. And I look to my left down, and I'm thinking I'm about to roll off and roll down this hill in from the train tracks. I'm like, this is it. Like, I'm not even gonna make it to Iraq or wherever they send us. But I fall. We lean over, it hit, and then it stops, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like what the heck? And then so. The guy on the ground guiding me, I mean, he's just another soldier like me, meaning he doesn't have any more experience on this railhead operation than I do. And so somebody that works there that's familiar with this, sees it and hears what's going on and runs down the thing. and obviously make sure I'm okay and I'm good. I'm right there. So, but the thing is, the only way to fix this is I've got to drive forward, to get it up onto the next rail car. And then there's, that gap, because now we've got to get the spanner back up on there, for the back tire to go over. So as I'm, doing that, I hit the gas and enough to get it up there, but, I had to stop real quick. And then luckily, it was enough distance and we could get the spanner back up there. And then I was able to drive over the next one and get it there, and then chain it all down, which still took a little while. And I was exhausted. I was tired. A whole lot of adrenaline went through. It was like, oh my gosh, what just happened? Thankfully, I made it. Was okay. So I guess that was a little bit of excitement to keep me awake. And but yeah, so got the truck on there and got it chained down like we were supposed to. And then they started talking about, well, someone's got to change that tire. Like, you can't have a bad tire on there. And I'm like, man, I don't know how to change that tire. And I'm not changing that tire right now at, being awake for this long. I'm tired. Like, anyway, long story short of that was we were allowed to go home, and I think somebody else did it. And I think we may have fixed it on the other side when we got it off the train or something. I don't even know, honestly, but it was okay. It was good to go at some point. So pretty challenging time to get all those training exercises done, get our equipment loaded, and get it up on, the railhead onto the ship eventually. And then meanwhile, I have at this point a month-old baby at home. My wife trying to help me out and support me as much as she can, which she always did an amazing job. But also, she's trying to take care of herself and the baby too. I mean, it's tough. So, so at this point we get that done, which is a huge sigh of relief, really, when it comes to the Army side, the training and getting our training exercise done, getting our equipment loaded and off, so we're kind of focusing then on our families and ourselves at that point. We do a lot of individual stuff, getting ready to go. And so that first Thanksgiving, that was our first Thanksgiving at Fort Hood. I mean, again, we're talking, I've only been at Fort Hood for, I got there in April of 2002, and this is November of 2002, so 8 months, 7 months, 4th, 11th month, 7 months. So haven't been there that long, and a whole lot of stuff has transpired, and things are moving really quick. And so that Thanksgiving, we actually went to my wife's cousin's house in Liberty Hill, which is just south of Fort Hood. And I met them for the first time, and wonderful family, and who we're still really close to and still, talk to as much as possible. But had, over our years at Fort Hood, we spent a lot of time there visiting them and being with some family. And sometimes that's a tough thing when you are in the military. You move to, a particular part of the country, and maybe you don't know anybody there. Maybe you don't have any family. Now, the interesting part for Texas for me was I actually grew up a few years in Texas in a small town north of Dallas, but I didn't know anybody else in Fort Hood area, Central Texas area. So having that family there did help. Our parents and close family members lived in Georgia and Florida. So it's, tough to come out and travel and see us all the time. But so it was nice to have some family, close by, which you just don't always have in the military, depending on where you live. Sometimes when we look at different options to move to a different location, we think we want to move back to like closer to friends and family, but the Army or whatever branch of service you're in may not have a place near there, or they may not have a spot for you. So, in 20 years, it's been tough to get back to where our friends and family mostly are, which is Georgia, Florida area. And so when it came time for us to be able to come to the East Coast, when we chose Fort Bragg in 2017, for us, it was kind of a no-brainer. We wanted to get back to closer to family and friends. And it's been great in that respect. But yeah, so the early days of Fort Hood, were challenging with the family. We spent that first Thanksgiving there with the Tappins, and it was amazing to meet them and be a part of their family. And they have been there and been a great part of our family, for ever since then. So, yeah, first Thanksgiving there, and then Christmas. So Christmas comes, and Christmas we go home. So we decide to come to Georgia, and we get to spend some time with our family and friends, and brought JJ home, our son, and so he got to meet or see the grandparents again, and be around some family friends. Granted, he was young; he had no idea what's going on, but so we had a good time with that. We knew the deployment was upcoming at that point, and so being able to spend some time with our family and friends at home was really important to us, and good for all of us. And then, we come back to Fort Hood at the end of December, and January comes, and we're really starting to prepare to leave. So we know we're going into Iraq, and our equipment's all loaded, and it's heading to Turkey. And if you remember any of the stuff that was going on, Turkey was not exactly going to allow us to use their soil to come through to invade Iraq. There's a lot of negotiating going on behind the scenes, and so it was kind of depending on where we were going to go, when we were going to leave, and stuff like that. So there was some challenges there. And then one of the other challenges was we didn't have enough licensed drivers for all of our equipment. So in the Army, you have to be licensed, trained and licensed on all of our equipment, on everything we use. And you have to go to basically a driver's school. That's a week or two, depending on the installation, to get certified and trained. So one of the things our platoon sergeant at the time said, hey, we didn't have enough drivers for all of our equipment. So he said, hey, if you need to go get trained, and one of the things is, if you don't go get trained and get licensed, if you're not already licensed, then you're not going to go to the promotion board. And meaning you need to set yourself apart to be recommended for promotion. And so, and I'll talk about promotions in a future show, but one of the things I always kind of went by was, I just want to know what the rules of the game are. And I did that even as a leader. I really tried to show the soldiers what's the rules of the game and learn how to play them. So whatever steps you're required to take to show the potential for promotion, then do them. So yes, and if you are paying attention, you are thinking, wait a minute, didn't he just drive some big truck onto the railhead? Yes, and I was not licensed on it. So that falls into, we sometimes in the Army do whatever we have to do to make the mission happen, regardless of circumstances, and that definitely was one of those times. So I was one of the people that were left that could do it, and I had driven it before sometimes when we were out in the field, so I was familiar with driving it, but I was not officially trained and licensed. So yeah, January. So the platoon sergeant said this, and I'm like thinking, well, I mean, if there's a chance for me to go to the promotion board, I don't want that to stop me, right? Like, if that's a rule, that's part of the game. Hey, let's go. So I went in and called and made a phone call, and was like, hey, called the transportation company, and they had a slot open, one slot left. And I was like, boom, yeah, I got it. So went home, told my wife, hey, I'm going to school for 2 weeks. So it was local, so I got to come home every day. But yeah, I went and actually got licensed and trained on the vehicles, and then I could come back to our unit. And then the master driver there would teach me specifically how to drive all of our different vehicles, but I would have my license and stuff like that. So yeah, so that happened in January, and then, we're preparing to leave. So a lot's going on. And the other interesting thing that happened during that time is, in December, I received a pursegram. And what that is it's a letter delivered through the Army. It's a personal gram, almost like the old telegram. And it's letters saying that you're on assignment, meaning you are supposed to report to a different duty station. So you have to move. We call it PCS, permanent change of station. So the Army says, hey, you're going to move to another place and go work there. And it said, I was going to report to Germany in May of 2003. Now, one of the things when I first came in the Army, so I was married, and you're guaranteed what's called stabilization. So you're guaranteed 36 months at your first duty station if you're married. And so we were shocked when I got this pursegram saying we were moving to Germany. And also, we kind of knew what was going on, obviously, with the deployment. Like, what is all this? And anyway, it was basically deleted. I wasn't going to move. Now, some would say, oh, man, Germany would have been awesome. And a lot of people will tell you they've had a great time, great experience being stationed in Germany. If you're married, you go over there for 36 months and you have an opportunity to see a lot of the European continent sometimes. So there would have been some great opportunities. In our 20 years of being in the Army, we've never made it over to Germany. So maybe that would have been nice to do at the time. But it wasn't to be. It was deleted, and then, everybody could calm down. I guess if you could calm down saying, well, we're not going to Germany, but now we're going to deploy. We're staying here because we have to deploy. So they needed me to be in the unit and to deploy. So that was something interesting that also happened during that time. And so a lot went on. I mean, from my son being born to the training exercises and getting all of our equipment ready to go and shipped off, and then figuring out when we're going to leave. And I'll tell you, so the next couple episodes are getting more into the deployment stuff and maybe a little bit more exciting, but there's some pretty interesting stories going to come up. And really, we're going to talk about dropping my bags off and getting on a bus and saying goodbye and what that's like. And, arriving in Kuwait, going through some of the challenges there early on, and then the initial invasion moving up into Iraq. So, a lot is going on, but a lot more is about to come on. And we're really barely a year into my Army career, into Miller's Military Moments. So definitely, stay tuned for more to come. And for sure, thanks for tuning in as this concludes episode 9. Thanks for tuning in, subscribing to the new YouTube channel, and leaving a comment if you want. And you can leave comments on the website as well, millersmilitarymoments.com. And so I ask everybody, hey, be kind, show compassion, and I'll see you next week. Peace.